Hello and welcome to a special multiverse edition of the DC Corner. This is Ed Garrett, Senior Editor for DC Reviews here at tmstash.com, and welcome. We're looking at Multiversity, which came out just on Wednesday from Grant Morrison. This is a series we've been waiting for literally for years, and it's really great to finally see all of this come out for a long-time reader like me who's been reading off and on for 50 years, and yes, I'm that old. It's a wonderful treasure trove of a lot of different Easter eggs that are hiding all through the pages of the book. For a new reader, it may be a little bit overwhelming. So what we want to do here is take a look back at the very beginnings of the DC multiverse and sort of carry you forward, so hopefully the whole series will make a little bit more sense and be a little bit more fun for you. So please pardon me for just a moment while I set this up. And I think we're set here with Multiversity. To get this really fully appreciated, you have to go way, way back to 1961 to Flash of Two Worlds. This is an iconic story to this very day, and if you go back and pick it up at Comixology on their Multiversity sale, you'll find that the story actually holds up rather well after all these years. But this was the first time that they explored the idea of there being something other than one DC Earth. A couple of other things they had in here besides the meeting of the Earth 1 and Earth 2 Flashes, Barry Allen meeting Jay Garrick, is they established some concepts that carry over all these years later, literally 53 years after this story was written. The first idea was the idea that what happened in one comics world appeared in the comic book pages of another. Barry Allen had grown up reading the exploits of Jay Garrick in his Flash comics. And the idea was that Gardner Fox, who incidentally was involved in this issue as well as Jay Garrick's run back in the Golden Age, supposedly when he was asleep, his mind was tuned in on the vibratory status of Earth 2. And this sort of helped establish that there were multiple Earths that occupied the same space but operated due to different vibrations. That concept has been expanded quite a bit in Multiversity, even to the point that the ship that travels between the various Earths is made of frozen music, and somehow by playing the different vibrations you can travel from one part of the multiverse to another. That started way back in 1961. Now, a couple of years later, they found a way to bring all of the heroes of Earth 2 and Earth 1 together, which started an annual summer series that I really loved. I used to go crazy every summer when the Justice League and the Justice Society met, but in this first meeting, done over the course of 2 issues, they established some more concepts that were important to this day, 51 years after this story came out. Whoops, sorry, we're going the wrong direction here. There we go. One of the concepts here was the idea that there was some space between the worlds. Now, in Multiversity, it's known as the Bleed. It really didn't have a particular name back then, but the villains of Earth 1 and Earth 2 were hiding out in a ship hidden in what is now known as the Bleed between Earth 1 and Earth 2. Another thing that happened is at the end of this arc, they mentioned the possibility of yet another Earth. Now, they hadn't really defined that Earth yet. It came out a little bit later when they had Crisis on Earth 3, which introduced us to Ultraman, Owlman, Superwoman, Power Ring, and all the rest of the crime syndicate of America that have since shown up in Forever Evil. They first showed up back in the early to mid-60s in Justice League of America. Now, skip forward a little over 20 years, and we hit Crisis on Infinite Earth. They had finally had so many different realities shown in the DC universe that they were having trouble with continuity all over the place. And they actually thought that this would solve all the problems. As we now know, it created about as many problems as it solved. But back then, in 1985, they collapsed all of the multiverse down to just one universe remaining. They later came up with things like hypertime and pocket universes, but they decided finally, I think this is around 2005, to give us a brief return of the multiverse, collapsing it back down into what was known at the time as New Earth instead of Earth 1. However, they followed that up with the Series 52 that eventually gave us 52 different universes in the DC multiverse. And that's where it remained all the way up until Flashpoint, which kept us with a multiverse but rewrote DC history. Now, the interesting thing here to me is that a lot of readers look at Flashpoint as rewriting history from 2011 on. And for us readers, certainly that's the case. But for the characters of the DC Universe, it actually rewrote DC's history all the way back to the very beginnings of time. So now then, in Multiversity, we're getting a chance to take a look at the effects of that. What did this turn out to be? What's, for lack of a better term, what's still considered canon? Well, in Multiversity, we do have one monitor left, and that does sort of fit in with what was happening in the later crises, where all the monitors of the different parts of the multiverse were gone except for one. And now they've unfortunately given him the title Super Judge. Oh my goodness. But still, one monitor left. We see Lady Quark, who we saw in the original Crisis on Infinite Earths. And we see some other people coming in from other universes. Here's Milestone represented. Here's the Superman of Action Comics #9 in the New 52, the President of the United States, who happens to be secretly Superman. And we even see Captain Carrot coming in. Now, what's interesting here is that he's walking up to Superman assuming they've met before. Obviously, he has not met this Superman. But have they met before? Has Superman met Captain Carrot? Why, absolutely. In 1982, Captain Carrot and his amazing zoo crew, the first issue included a meeting with the Superman that was then present, and this was prior to Crisis, so I guess we could say Earth 1. The funny thing on this one is that back then his secret identity was Roger Rabbit. This was some 4 years before the movie came out. Now in Multiversity, his secret identity is Rodney Rabbit, so I guess Captain Marvel being changed to Shazam is not the only name change they're doing in order to prevent confusion with other publishers. But speaking of other publishers, there's a world where there are knockoffs of the Marvel characters. And please tell me that's not Savage Dragon there hiding out as Dino Cop. I guess what they're really trying to say here is that in the multiverse, this amazing map here that Grant Morrison's come up with, basically every comics character who has ever lived in the pages of any comic book from any publisher exists somewhere in the orrery of worlds. What a term. And that in each world they have read about all the other heroes in all the other worlds in the pages of their comic books. Now, there's obviously a multiversal threat that's affecting everybody. That comes with the Gentry, and that's a very mysterious and nightmarish-looking group of beings that we'll learn obviously more about in the series. And we'll learn more about the multiverse itself. There's some interesting things in here. If you listen to DC All Access, and if you're not subscribing to that on YouTube, I would highly recommend it. They've talked about some things like, for example, the realm where, in the underworld where Hades lives, that's also somehow the home of the Phantom Zone. And the Speed Force is a barrier between the worlds of the multiverse and the sphere of the gods. That's an interesting concept, too, that could lead to some very interesting tie-ins for future Flash stories, and even a tie-in between the Flash of what is now known as Earth Zero. That's the main DC Earth now, is Earth Zero, and Earth 2 with Jay Garrick, whose powers are more granted by a dying Mercury rather than the classic Speed Force definition. It looks like we may have a bridge between those coming up. As for the story itself, well, this issue is more of a setup. It really gives us a general idea of what's going on. It doesn't fully give us a plot other than to say, here's your big bad, and here's the call that goes out to all the heroes of the 50 worlds. Interesting they would use that term. We believe there's 52 worlds in the multiverse, but we do know Earth 3 has died. Maybe there's another world, and there certainly is an allusion to the idea that another world has died in the early pages of Multiversity. So that may be why they're just saying 50 worlds. But certainly in the Hall of Heroes we're seeing a vast array of characters, some old, some new, some with a different twist. And I'm excited to see where it's going to go. I can see where a new reader might be a little bit overwhelmed. Hopefully this tutorial has helped you a little bit to understand the background on it. There are a lot of other articles out on the web right now, and some things from DC All Access themselves that will help you out with this. But it's well worth checking out. The artwork is fantastic. The scope is immense, and we'll see. I think the real judge of this will be eventually how the tie-in issues work, how the series itself plays out, and whether it holds up over time. But hopefully we'll see some really great things out of this one. We've certainly been waiting long enough. Now, that's it for this DC Corner. There'll be more DC information and reviews showing up on our regular Comics Week in Review podcast, Issue 1, coming up later tonight. Be sure to check that out. And as always, keep checking tmstash.com for all your news, reviews, and commentary. This is Ed Garrett for tmstash.com signing off. We'll see you soon.